If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge. And when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. The fatal crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. The Mercedes-Benz S280 entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at 12:23 a.m. What happened in those next few seconds would change history forever. Henri Paul pressed harder on the gas pedal. The speedometer climbed past 60 miles per hour in the 30 miles per hour zone. Behind them, motorcycle engines roared. Bright camera flashes lit up the tunnel like lightning strikes. The photographers were getting closer. Diana sat in the back seat next to Dodi. She had pulled her seatbelt tight, but something felt wrong. The car was moving too fast. The tunnel walls rushed past in a blur of yellow light. Then came the sound no one could forget. Metal crushing metal, glass exploding everywhere. The screech of tires trying to grip concrete. The Mercedes hit the 13th pillar head-on and spun like a broken toy. Steam rose from the twisted wreckage. The tunnel fell silent, except for the hiss of the radiator. Henri Paul died instantly. So did Dodi Fayed. Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard in the front passenger seat, lay unconscious, but breathing. His face was badly hurt, but he would live. Diana was trapped in the back. She was conscious and talking, but her injuries were hidden and deadly. Internal bleeding that doctors couldn't see from the outside was slowly taking her life away. The first person to reach the car was Dr. Frederick Meillet. He was driving home from a party when he saw the smoke. He had no idea who was inside the twisted metal. He just saw people who needed help. The paparazzi arrived within minutes. Some tried to help. Others kept taking pictures. The flashbulbs popped like tiny explosions while Diana lay dying just feet away. Fire trucks came next. Then ambulances with their sirens cutting through the night air. It took over an hour to free Diana from the wreckage. Every minute counted, but the car had wrapped around her like a steel trap. They rushed her to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. The doctors worked for hours. They opened her chest and tried to stop the bleeding inside. But the damage was too great. Her heart had torn when the car hit the pillar. At 4 a.m., they pronounced her dead. The woman who had captured the world's heart was gone. But the questions were just beginning. Why was Henri Paul driving so fast? What made him lose control? And who were those men on motorcycles that witnesses saw in the tunnel that night? Early investigations and official conclusions. The official investigation began just hours after the Mercedes crashed into that concrete pillar. French authorities took charge of the case, and their findings would shape how the world understood that terrible night in Paris. Judge Hervé Stephan led the inquiry. His team worked for months, gathering evidence from the twisted metal and broken glass. They tested blood samples, measured skid marks, and interviewed witnesses who saw the car racing through the tunnel. The results painted a clear picture, according to French law. Henri Paul, the driver, had been drinking heavily that evening. His blood showed alcohol levels 3 times the legal limit. The tests also revealed prescription drugs in his system, medications that should never mix with alcohol. Paul worked as deputy head of security at the Ritz Hotel. He knew the building's secrets and the back exits. That night, he had spoken with photographers outside the hotel. Some witnesses said he seemed confident, even cocky, as he prepared to drive Diana and Dodi away from the cameras. The car had been traveling at dangerous speeds through Paris streets. Investigators calculated the Mercedes was moving at least 65 miles per hour when it hit the pillar. The speed limit in that tunnel was just 30 miles per hour. Something else made the crash more deadly. Neither Diana nor Dodi wore seatbelts. Only their bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, had buckled up. He survived with severe injuries, while the others did not. The paparazzi had followed them that night, racing on motorcycles behind the speeding car. But the French investigation found something unexpected. The photographers did not cause the crash directly. The Mercedes had pulled far ahead of them before entering the tunnel. Medical records revealed the true cause of Diana's death. She suffered a tear in her pulmonary vein, a major blood vessel near her heart. Doctors at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital fought for hours to save her life. They performed emergency surgery, massaging her heart by hand. Despite their efforts, she died at 4 a.m. The official verdict seemed straightforward. A drunk driver, excessive speed, no seatbelts. These facts explained everything, according to French authorities. Yet questions lingered in the shadows. Why had Henri Paul seemed so calm before driving? What about the mysterious white car that some witnesses saw? And why did it take so long for help to arrive at the crash site? The French investigation had provided answers. But for many people around the world, those answers only raised more questions about what really happened in that tunnel. Emerging conspiracy theories and public speculation. In the months following that dark August night in Paris, a grieving father would change everything. Mohamed Al-Fayed sat in his London office, staring at photographs of his son Dodi. The official reports called it a tragic accident. He called it murder. Al-Fayed owned Harrods department store and commanded respect across Britain. When he spoke, people listened, and what he said sent shockwaves through the nation. "They killed my son," he declared to anyone who would hear him. "They killed Diana because she was going to marry an Egyptian Muslim." His words were simple but explosive. Al-Fayed claimed that British intelligence agents had planned the crash. He pointed fingers at the royal family, suggesting they could never accept Diana marrying outside their circle. The paparazzi chase, he insisted, was just a cover story. The grieving father went further. He whispered that Diana had been pregnant with Dodi's child. Hospital records were sealed too quickly, he argued. Why the rush if there was nothing to hide? These claims spread like wildfire through newspapers and television shows. People began asking uncomfortable questions. Why had the driver Henri Paul been drinking that night? Some witnesses swore they saw a white Fiat Uno near the tunnel, but this car was never found. Others reported seeing bright flashes before the crash. Were these camera flashes or something more sinister? Al-Fayed's allegations split the public down the middle. Millions believed every word he said. They saw a powerful establishment protecting itself at any cost. Diana had been too dangerous, too willing to speak her mind about landmines and royal secrets. She had to be stopped. But millions more felt disgusted by these theories. They saw a desperate father refusing to accept a terrible accident. His claims seemed to dishonor Diana's memory and cause unnecessary pain to her sons William and Harry. The media fed on this controversy like sharks sensing blood. Documentaries appeared on television. Books filled store shelves. Internet forums buzzed with heated debates. Everyone had an opinion about what really happened in that tunnel. Some witnesses changed their stories under pressure. Others stuck to their original accounts, despite threats and bribes. The confusion grew thicker with each passing month. Al-Fayed never stopped believing. He spent millions on private investigators and legal challenges. He demanded new inquests and fresh evidence. His persistence kept the questions alive long after the world wanted to move on. The official investigations had seemed so certain, so final, but one man's refusal to accept their conclusions had cracked open a door that would never fully close again. Operation Paget, the British Metropolitan Police inquiry. Something strange was happening in London. 7 years had passed since that terrible night in Paris, yet questions still whispered through the streets. People could not let go of their doubts about what really happened to Princess Diana. The stories kept growing. secret meetings, hidden evidence, cover-ups that reached the highest levels of power. Each whisper added another layer to the mystery that refused to die. In 2004, something changed. The British authorities decided they had heard enough. They would create the biggest investigation ever seen. It would be called Operation Paget, and it would dig into every single claim that people were making. Lord Stevens stepped forward to lead this massive search for truth. He was no ordinary detective. This was a man who had spent decades solving the hardest cases Britain had ever seen. If anyone could find the real story, it would be him. The team he assembled was extraordinary. Experts from every field imaginable. Scientists who could read the secrets hidden in twisted metal. Doctors who understood exactly what happens to the human body in a crash. Intelligence officers who knew how to separate fact from fiction. They gathered everything. Every photograph from that night. Every witness statement. Every piece of evidence that had been collected or forgotten. The pile of materials grew so high it filled entire rooms. For 3 years they worked in secret. They traveled to Paris and walked through that tunnel dozens of times. They examined the car piece by piece. They interviewed hundreds of people who claimed to know something about that night. The photographers who had chased Diana through the streets were questioned again and again. Their cameras were studied. Their movements were tracked minute by minute. Henri Paul, the driver who had died in the crash, became the subject of intense investigation. His blood was tested repeatedly. His actions that evening were examined under a microscope. Even the most wild claims were taken seriously. Did British intelligence plan the crash? Was there a white car that caused everything? Were there people in that tunnel who should not have been there? When the final report appeared, it was massive. Over 800 pages of findings that would change everything people thought they knew about that night in Paris. The truth, they discovered, was both simpler and sadder than anyone had imagined. The British Inquest verdict, HTML. 10 years after that terrible night in Paris, something extraordinary happened. A jury of 11 ordinary people sat in a London courtroom and made a decision that would change everything. They had spent months listening to witness after witness, examining every piece of evidence, and studying countless photographs from that fateful tunnel. The room was silent as the foreman stood up. His voice was steady, but the weight of his words filled the air. "Unlawful killing," he said. Those 2 words would echo through history. But this was not the conspiracy that some had whispered about for years. This was something different entirely. The jury had found the truth hidden in plain sight. Henri Paul, the driver, had been drinking that night. His blood showed levels of alcohol that made driving impossible. He had also taken pills that made everything worse. Behind the wheel, he was like a man walking in the dark with his eyes closed. But Paul was not alone in causing this tragedy. The photographers who chased Diana's car through the streets of Paris that night were equally to blame. They drove like hunters pursuing their prey, caring nothing for the danger they created. Their cameras were more important than human lives. The jury learned something else that chilled them to the bone. None of the people in that Mercedes were wearing seatbelts. Diana, Dodi, and Henri Paul were all thrown around the car like leaves in a storm when it hit the concrete pillar. Only Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard who wore his seatbelt, survived to tell the story. As the verdict was read, Mohamed Al-Fayed sat quietly in the courtroom. For 10 years, this man had fought battles and made accusations. He had pointed fingers at powerful people and demanded answers to impossible questions. But now, hearing these simple facts, something changed in his eyes. The cameras were waiting outside as Al-Fayed walked into the London sunshine. Reporters expected anger or defiance. Instead, they heard something no one had expected. "I accept the verdict," he said quietly. After a decade of fighting, the battle was over. The royal family said nothing publicly, but those close to them whispered of relief. At last, the official story was complete. Diana had died because of drunk driving and reckless photographers, not because of plots or schemes in palace rooms. The mystery that had consumed the world for 10 years was solved not by secret agents or hidden documents, but by 11 people who simply listened to the evidence and spoke the truth. Lasting impact and unresolved questions. The world stopped on August 31st, 1997. In homes across every continent, people gathered around their televisions in stunned silence. Diana, the people's princess, was gone. What happened next was unlike anything in modern history. Millions of flowers appeared outside royal palaces. People who had never met Diana wept openly in the streets. The line of mourners stretched for miles, their faces showing a grief that seemed too deep for someone they knew only through photographs. The funeral drew nearly 2 billion viewers worldwide. Even hardened journalists struggled to find words. Something about Diana's death touched a nerve that went beyond celebrity or royalty. It felt personal. It felt wrong. In the years that followed, questions refused to fade away. Official reports said accident. Investigators said drunk driver. Judges said tragic mistake. But whispers in coffee shops and internet forums told different stories. People remembered the paparazzi chase through Paris tunnels. They wondered about the broken seatbelt. They asked why the driver took that particular route. Small details that might mean nothing suddenly seemed important when viewed through the lens of suspicion. The royal family changed after Diana. They began showing emotion in public. They started explaining their actions. The cold distance that once defined royalty began to crack. Diana's sons would later speak openly about mental health and personal struggles, something unthinkable before their mother's death. Media companies rewrote their rules. The aggressive pursuit of celebrities became less acceptable. New laws protected privacy in ways that might have saved Diana's life. Yet photographers still chase famous faces through city streets, and tabloids still print secrets stolen through long lenses. Today, documentaries still examine every detail of that August night. Books promise new revelations. Social media buzzes with theories that refuse to die. Each anniversary brings fresh speculation alongside genuine remembrance. Perhaps this endless curiosity exists because Diana represented something pure in a world that felt increasingly corrupt. Her death at 36, when she seemed to be finding happiness again, carries a tragedy that feels almost designed to haunt us. The official story remains unchanged. 3 people died in a car accident caused by a drunk driver fleeing photographers. No conspiracy, no cover-up. Just a terrible collision of circumstances that destroyed something beautiful. Yet questions linger in the shadows. In quiet conversations and late-night internet searches, people still wonder. They want to believe that someone so loved, so needed, could not have died for such ordinary reasons. Maybe the mystery is the point. Maybe some truths are too painful to accept without the comfort of doubt.